welcome once again to the L&D Ninja Podcast. I'm your host, Reggie Bedin, and I'm so glad you're here with us for this fantastic episode. As you know, I try to bring guests who are enlightening, entertaining, who can pour their experience into our lives as L&D professionals, and today is no exception. Before we introduce the guest today, I want to thank you so much for all your kind words, your comments, your likes, your sharing, subscribing to the podcast. It's been a fantastic, mind-blowing. I didn't think it was going to take off the way that it has, but we're here to help you along your journey as L&D professionals, whether you are new in the space or you're considering moving into the space. That's why we do this. So thank you so much for your support. I couldn't be any happier. So remember, like, share, subscribe, share with other people within your network. If you're finding value in the podcast, please share the good news with other people. My guest today is Michael Sabbag. He is a wonderful L&D professional right down here in the sunny state of Florida, with a wealth of experience in developing both programs and leaders, and I couldn't be happier to have him on the podcast. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much. That was a very kind introduction.
Well, listen, one of the things that I like to do, Michael, is to bring people who can share so much with people and professionals in our space. And, I'm glad that we got connected, because I think that you would be, I know you're going to be a great wealth of information and good nuggets for those of us who are, still finding our way in the L&D space.
Yeah, I hope so.
How's it going?
Good. It's going well. Sunny day in South Florida. Great day for baseball.
Okay. Well, it's a little cloudy where I am, but hey, that's Florida for you, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, welcome, Mike. I'm so glad that you're here. Tell us what you do, where you're at, and we'll take it from there.
So I am the Director of Organizational Development at Broward Health. Broward Health is the 10th largest public healthcare system in the United States. And so we serve all of the residents of the northern 2/3 of the county. And I'm really, really happy to be here at Broward Health. It's a great organization, and we provide exemplary care to people.
What so do you have a team of L&D professionals that service the employees?
Yeah, I'm in charge of all non-clinical training and internal consulting. So on the non-clinical side, we have someone over staff development and someone over leadership development, and they both report to me.
Excellent.
Then I have another person overseeing orientation. So your very first day here is in the classroom with us, whether there's a pandemic going on or not. We've been in the classroom the entire time. We just take the proper precautions to make sure everyone was safe. And through the entire pandemic so far, no one has gotten sick from being in the classroom.
Oh my goodness,
track all of that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But we really feel it's important for that face-to-face time, that networking time. It's your first day, you're a little nervous, being able to just pull someone aside at a break and see where they're going, what hospital they'll be working at or what clinic they'll be working at, or if they're working at a physician practice. I think that's really valuable, is to have that face time. So we've made a conscious decision not to have it virtual.
Yeah.
We do have a computer-based orientation, but that's the exception. And there's only a few people every other week that attend that. But anywhere from 30 to 70 people every other week attend new hire orientation.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so when you say non-clinical people, what is sort of the positions of?
So the audience for orientation is everyone except for nurses in a bedside clinical role. Okay. So everyone, paramedics, transporters, nutrition, everyone comes to new hire orientation. For development of people, we focus on the development of soft skills, not clinical skills.
Got it.
That's what I meant by I'm in charge of all non-clinical training, because we don't have the expertise to do the clinical training.
Sure.
but we do have deep expertise on the human side of business.
Sure, sure, sure. And so you deal with leadership management,
Yes,
that type
all
of training.
levels.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how long have you been how long have you been doing this, Michael? Because I know that you've been in this role for a while. I mean, you're in my
Yeah.
opinion an authority in this space. How long have you been in L&D? How'd you get started? I always like to ask people that kind of question because
Yeah.
most of the people I talk to got into it by almost by mistake, by accident.
Well,
Um,
I'm one of those weird ones where I got into it by design
is that right?
after changing my major in college.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So my first major, when I started, I went to Florida State University, and I started in aerospace engineering was going to be my major because I love NASA. I love the space program. I was fascinated by the space shuttle and wanted to design better spacecraft
Uh-huh.
for NASA. And then I started getting into the basic courses for my major, and I was like, this seems like more of a hobby for me. It's not something that I want to pursue for a living. And then for like a year and a half, I was doing the basic studies classes, not
Uh-huh.
knowing what I wanted to do. And then the second semester of my sophomore year, I took a class with Dr. John Bailey called Behavior Analysis in Business and Industry. And basically, it's an industrial psychology class with a very strong emphasis on learning behaviorism, behavior
Sure.
analysis,
Sure.
but applying it not to a clinical population, but to the work population.
Hmm.
And so I took that class with him, and he was so awesome that I was hooked. And the way that manifests itself is after getting my master's degree, I found I could either go into HR or a field of HR. So I selected a field of HR, being OD and training.
Huh.
So I've always been interested in positive techniques to gain better performance and create that win-win.
Yeah.
It's the win for the employee because of how they feel when they're getting recognized for being great at work.
Yeah.
It's a win because they get to progress in their career. And it's a win for the organization because they
Absolutely.
have more capable people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you shared that with me because I haven't met many
Yeah,
who
I'm one of the few.
who went into
That
by
was
design.
I've been doing this 36 years now. It started with a consulting project in that class that I took with Dr. Bailey. And Dr. Bailey was one of the first people to apply behaviorism to non-clinical populations. So he
Oh,
really started this field of industrial psychology. Prior to that, industrial psychology was more of selection and placement,
right,
testing,
right.
psychometrics, ergonomics, things like that.
Well, certainly it's changed drastically, right? And
It
it
has,
continues to evolve.
yeah.
Now, Michael, you've been in several industries, correct?
Hundreds, yeah. Because I've
Because you're
I've
consulting.
consulted to hundreds of organizations throughout my career because half my career has been in consulting and half of it's been working internally. And internally, I've been in probably 6 or 7 different industries because I deal with the human condition. My skills
Sure.
are very transferable across industries.
Yeah, yeah. That I mean, that's the beauty of what we do, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we have to deal with people, no matter what they do, right? And so,
right. And no
you're
matter the
absolutely
flavor of
right.
the day,
Yeah, yeah, you're
because
absolutely
for a
right.
while, the flavor of the day was talent management.
Right.
And that's still very relevant. But then it was like more organizational culture. And now it's more around the employee experience. So that continues to evolve, but our approaches to people in the workplace, um, even though they're evolving, they're pretty steady over time.
Yeah,
Because again, it's about the human condition, and that
yeah,
doesn't change over time.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we are who we are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Listen. So you've done consulting and you've been as you mentioned an internal leader within organizations. What do you what I mean? Do you see the similarities and differences? What do you like best? I mean, if because you spend most of your career, as you mentioned, doing
Yeah,
consulting work, and there may be L&D professionals out there that may either want to go into consulting and how or some people may be wanting to go into working for an organization, 100%. So
Right.
what can you say about both tracks?
Um, the work that we do once we're in the organization is very similar, whether we're an external consultant or working within the organization. Because in learning and performance or learning and development, we take more of a consultative approach
Correct.
than most other professions. And what I mean by that is that we're not just order takers.
Right.
We don't just put together a curriculum and do it year after year after year. We have to assess what are the needs of the business.
Right.
What do the leaders want? And is that valid given where we are, what we want to do, our strategic imperatives for the organization, and also given what's really going on with their people.
Yeah.
Getting down to the root cause of what's going on with their people,
Yeah.
and not just having a leader come say, I want a customer service class, and say, great, I've got a customer service class. When do we want to teach it?
Right. If it weren't that easy.
Many other factors that drive performance in the workplace. So, for example, one of the factors in my model, there are 7 factors in my model. One of the factors is process. And so if we look at the systems and the processes that are in place, and that's the issue, why do we want to train people to become really good at following a bad process?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, we take more of a consultative approach. And I found that the work isn't very different. Getting the work is tougher as a consultant than working internally.
Yeah.
Working internally, we develop a brand within the organization, and that brand usually pulls people to us because we're solving their problems around people.
And what do you say? I guess in both instances, either they're looking for a consultant or to hire somebody, full time. What sort of pain points have you found in organizations to want to move in that direction, to either bring in a consultant or hire somebody full time?
Well, I've found that the pain points that they present are not usually the real issues.
Okay.
And I don't say that to be mean to any of the leaders that I've worked with, because I've worked with great leaders in my career. But they have a certain vision. They have a certain view. There's a saying that we have: if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And so I present them with other tools to take a deeper look at what's going on in their workplace. Not just one issue, meaning that they need training.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is really the issue.
Yeah.
But is it the process? Is it that I didn't provide clear expectations as a leader? And really helping them isolate what's going on.
Yeah, I've seen that over and over again too, where the leadership say, well, let's put a training together, right? And it's like, okay, time out. Yeah, we may need a training for this, but let's look at the whole situation before, because then it's not going to be as effective, right?
Right. And there's another difference between consulting and working internally. Sometimes working internally, I have to be an order taker, meet that request to develop credibility with that leader, so that then I can do performance consulting. Mm-hmm. Because he's not ready for it at that moment, because he's like, who's this guy?
Right.
Tell me about my department.
Right.
I'm like, I'm no one. I'm not telling you about your department. I'm just helping you answer some questions that I have in my mind.
Yeah.
That'll help you see deeper into what's really going on in your department.
Well, and that takes time, right? I mean, it takes time for you to build that relationship and credibility. And everybody, we're sort of very protective of our, of what we do, and so our guards are going to go up. So it takes some time to break through that, through that guard, right, and say, look, I'm on your side.
Unless you're a consultant. Because as a consultant, you're getting paid for your expertise.
Right.
So they're all in already.
Yeah. So what about in a situation like you are right now, that you're working, full time in a place? How do you navigate that?
It's about relationships.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do. It's about relationships. So it's about spending the time with people, getting to know them, getting to know what their needs are. With the more senior level leaders, like directors and above, it's getting to know what are some of the people issues that they're having, and how I can help them. And those small successes over time help me build the brand of organization development, leadership development here at Broward Health, which causes them to come to me. I've been here 2.25 years, and the first 8 months were the start of the pandemic. I started on March 16th of 2020. First day I started, my boss said, Michael, I'm glad you're here. Get bleach wipes, get gloves. We're wiping down the training center. So that was my introduction.
That was your welcome to the team.
Yeah. Yeah. But doing that, pitching in and doing that, working with leaders proactively, taking a look at what's going on with our balanced scorecard.
Yeah.
And just reaching out to leaders proactively and saying, hey, I've got this training class coming up, and use that as a means to develop the relationship.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. Yes, I mean, those relationships are vital, right, to having any kind of impact.
Yeah.
And it's, like any relationship, it's going to take time, right? And so how do you navigate the fact that it's going to take you time to build that sort of relationship, right, and that rapport with the individuals that you're trying to help? Well, at the same time, because you know how management is, they want to see things done. Yesterday we hired you today, but we want to, see something by next week. How do you navigate that immediate delivery of, maybe going for the low hanging fruit as you build these long-term relationships for a greater impact on the future?
Yeah. I think you nailed it right there, Reggie. You have to go for the low hanging fruit and get those short-term wins, so that you're building that credibility to go for the more strategically important, longer term types of initiatives. There's another saying that I like, which is people don't care what you know till they know that you care.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so getting those short-term wins, making that leader look good, and not really caring if I look good or not, because what really matters is that they look good and their people look good.
Yeah.
And then that's why people are like, come to me immediately, sometimes too much, because you create that pull for what you do instead of having to push what you do on them.
Yeah.
We have new leader orientation here, and it's mandatory for all leaders, but I haven't had to use the word mandatory in over a year.
Wow.
Yeah, because leaders are coming to me saying, hey, I have this new person and I want them to attend that.
Excellent.
Because we've restructured it to really meet the needs of the business, not just be a data dump.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and by the way, I take the same philosophy, and so for anybody who is new in this space, look, I tell my teams all the time, we're here to serve. Right, number one, we're servant leaders. And we're here to serve the organization as a whole. It's not about us. So, I'm sure that you've gone through this. When things are going well, you probably, don't hear anything. you don't hear any praise. You only hear things when things are not going well. And so I tell my teams all the time, look, we're here to serve. We're here to make people, our bosses look good and make sure that everybody, there's a good vibe. Because I think that's where, that what eventually leads to a culture of learning, right? When if people are feeling good about what's going on, they'll continue to grow in what they do. And so, if you hear praise, then wow, embrace it. Really embrace it, because it doesn't come too often. At least it's been my experience. Where you normally see it is in the people who attend your classes, right? And when their eyes light up, and you see the growth in their lives, right? I mean, when you're there long enough to see them, sort of take their baby steps to where they are probably now, it's very gratifying. At least for me, it is.
And what's also interesting to me is how my perception of learners has evolved over my career. Because when I was first in training, when I first started doing training, it was at a company called Continental Cablevision, which was acquired by US West and became Media One, which was the third largest cable provider, which was then acquired by AT&T, became AT&T Broadband, which was then acquired by Comcast. And so when I first started doing training for Continental Cablevision, I loved seeing the light bulbs go off and the smiles on people's faces. And I didn't like them being overwhelmed in class. Now, I want them to get to the state of overwhelm.
Yeah.
I want them to get to that state where they have to think completely different about whatever topic we're talking about how to communicate more effectively and become even better at communicating with my team members. How do I set clear expectations? How do I set really, really good goals?
Yeah.
You know, and when they start to realize, oh no, I'm not doing this. You know, that's what I love to see, because I know after that,
Yeah.
once they practice doing it and they see themselves good at it, that's when I'm going to get that light bulb moment.
Yeah. You're 100%
I used
correct
to
there.
fear that, though. I used to fear the, oh no, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was something on me
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
trainer.
You hit. I think you hit on something earlier that I wanna ask you a little bit more about. You said you have a 7-step process. Can you
Yeah,
and you mentioned the first one. Can you go through the rest? I mean, you don't have to go in detail, but
sure.
I'm intrigued to learn more about it, because it's the first time I hear about it. So can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit?
I love this topic because this is at the root of what we do in learning and performance, or learning and development. In 2003, I had created this model because leaders kept coming to me and saying, hey, Michael, this was a great class. I want my people to attend. And I was like, why? What do you want them to get out of it?
Yeah.
What aren't they doing now that they should be doing? And they were like, I don't know. It was a great class. And I said, well, there's lots of ways to drive performance. And so I created this really crappy model based upon just what I thought at the time. And it wasn't really that crappy because people liked it and said, hey, you should write a book about this. And I said, well, if I'm going to put this out in my practice as a product or write a book about it, I'd better have some research behind it. So I did a meta-analysis. I looked at the entire body of knowledge on human performance improvement and found, based on my research and aggregating all the data that was out there, there's 7 factors that drive performance. And so when we're looking at doing performance improvement, we want to know, well, what's going on, isolating the specific behavior. Thomas Gilbert, in his book, Human Competence, had the whole concept of potential for improvement. And so is the potential greater than the cost?
Yeah.
Because if there's no ROI in it, don't do it. But then we have to get to the root cause of why. And that's where the 7 factors come in. So the process is often at cause, and either the employee or the team member isn't following a good process, or the process itself needs to be fixed. Another factor is talent and fit. And this is one of the most controversial factors because I define talent a little different in my construct than others do. So talent is the innate ability that you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's a function of both genetic and your social upbringing, your
Sure.
genetic and psychological makeup.
Sure.
So how are you wired? You know, I'm a certain number of inches high, tall,
Right.
or centimeters. I have a propensity for taking strategic types of things and pulling them together into an easy to understand strategy.
Right.
I'm not really good at language. That's just how I'm wired. You know,
Sure.
it takes me a lot of effort to learn a new language. The other part is what's your life view? All of that makes up your talent factor. And that's something we also can't change. So if talent's the issue, there's only a few things that we can do about it. One is change the nature of the job to align with the person's strengths. Another is change them to another job, a completely different job, but one that aligns with their strengths. And if we don't have those options available within the company, then we need to allow them to explore their options outside of the company.
Let me ask you something. I want to pause you there, because how much of this should be considered in the talent search? And the reason I ask, you probably know where I'm going with this. The reason I ask is because sometimes we hire to fill what we see as a gap, right? But then it doesn't matter how much training you give that individual, right? If it's the wrong individual for that position. And so it clicked on me when you said, do we have to ask the question, is it worth even training is, going there, right? I mean, so
Right.
do you find that working in conjunction with recruiters is key to this? It seems like there has to be a greater working in concert, right?
Yeah.
In order to be able to
Well,
do it.
yeah, with the talent acquisition consultants that we have here, I work really closely with them. But we also work with other areas of HR, such as compensation,
Mm,
because compensation is the one that creates the job descriptions with the essential duties and the skills that people need, and sometimes even the competencies that people need. So we want to make sure that this is all taken into account to get a full picture of objectively and without bias what's needed for success in that role.
got it.
And
Got
then
it.
when we're trying to find candidates for that role, we want to find people with both sides of the coin. One
Yeah.
side is the technical skills, the other side are the interpersonal skills that are needed. And the hard part is the fit factor, because the factor is called talent and fit. It's not just the talent factor. And fit is the person's decision to use their talents within the context of your organization. So some people might not be a good fit for an industry because they don't align with that
Sure.
organization
Sure.
or with that industry,
Sure.
or the culture of that organization doesn't align with their personal values.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah, and I've taught that in the classroom for many
yeah,
many years. I mean, because
yeah,
like you, I love training new leaders and managers, and so I used to be very very authentic with them and say, look, don't the worst thing you can do for the organization and for yourself is just to be there and not have any passion and not
right,
contribute. And sometimes we have to make those moves, right? We have to be
yeah,
proactive in our careers and say, look, I have the skill set, but it's just not a good, like you mentioned, not a good fit within this organization. And
yeah.
so you have to be proactive in doing that. That's fascinating.
But
So
fit is one of those terms like attitude, where they throw it around and they say
yeah,
this person has a great attitude or this person has a bad attitude. But organizations need to be purposeful in defining what that means.
yeah.
Otherwise, they can run into trouble and get rid of people that could have been a good fit and could have been really high producers.
Michael, you make a very good point about talent and fit, and that's also a balancing act because sometimes, and it takes patience, right? Because sometimes uh, the person may take a little longer to grab a hold and really, be sold
Right.
out for the vision of the organization. Um, and sometimes it never happens, right? And so it's a
Yeah.
it's a it's a balancing act. So that very good point there. What's the next step in your process? And by the way,
So,
is this book available? Can we put a link somewhere and people can get it?
yeah, yeah, I'll
Yeah,
provide you with a link that you can share
excellent.
with your
Yeah,
audience.
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I do want to make a point before I get into the next factor that it's not really a process, that there's like Bloom's taxonomy has different levels of learning and doing.
Yes.
The one that matters most is the one that's going to help that person expand their strength, because the process is a strengths-based coaching approach to developing performance.
Mm,
And so if it's a fit issue, I need to have my leader work with me to determine what's going to help me fit in better in the organization. Is it a choice that I'm making that I can change?
mm,
Like if going out after work every so often is something that I never want to do, but everyone in the office feels like I don't want to participate with them.
mm.
Does that mean it's not the right fit for me? Or does that mean, you know what, if I did it like maybe once a month instead of once a week with everyone, I'd flex a little, I'd be a better fit,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
So, or if the process is at cause for that performance, then you focus on the process. They're all
yeah,
equally important, is my point.
yeah. Got it. Got
And
it.
another one is tools and resources. So when we examine performance, we have to think, do they have the right tools to do their job and the right resources to be successful? So tools being like, if my computer's crashing or if I don't have the software that I need, and it takes me an hour to do video editing
Yeah,
that really in the right tool would take 3 minutes,
yeah,
then I'm not going to be effective. I'm not going to be a good performer. Resources being, I'm overwhelmed, I don't have enough time, and I don't have the mental space to even think about anything, so I'm failing at everything. So time is a resource, budget is a resource, things like that.
Yes.
So we need to examine that. Another factor is the environment. So there's two different aspects to the environment. One is your work environment, which has to do with the organizational culture, with ergonomics, how things are set up. Are they set up efficiently? With whether you have a cubicle or an office or you work from home, that contains your environment.
Yeah.
It also includes the relationships that you have with people, because people are in your environment at work. And how are those relationships? Are there people that you can joke with and have fun with and talk with? Are there confidants that you can talk with and they'll help you talk through challenges or issues you're having with work-related topics, things like that. But then the other aspect of the environment is your personal environment. And this doesn't show up in most of the models. But I think of people as systems consisting of a lot of different parts. And all the parts have to work together for the person to work. And if something's going on outside of work that's impacting your thought processes or your attention, then it's going to take away from your work, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
So, for example, my son plays baseball. If I'm not able to be at the game, then I'm probably trying to see if I can follow it on the website for the league that he's in.
Sure.
And see how is he doing. And that's,
sure.
Even though that's great and he usually does well, it's still taken away from work. So your personal environment also impacts your work.
Let me pause you right there for a second, because I have a question for you, and you've probably thought about this already. It seems as though the maybe not in every industry. I'm sure that in the health field, it's not going to be remote, but certainly a lot of companies out there and industries are moving in that direction. And so I'm wondering, as I listen to your model, how some of these steps would apply in a remote environment, and how could the manager be proactive in considering all these factors in a remote virtual environment? Have you thought about that?
I think a lot of organizations are switching to either a hybrid approach or a remote where it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're customer facing or patient facing, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
With some instances it can, like with telemedicine.
Sure.
The doctor can be remote.
Yeah.
But with most instances for bedside care, you have to be at the bedside.
Yeah.
I think that they're doing it in a large way to react to the situation that we're in with a lack of labor and with the changing demands of workers in our ecosystem. Mm-hmm. What they're not doing well, which they will figure out, organizations will figure this out and correct it, is changing the way they lead people that are remote. And what I mean by that is that those casual conversations you have in the office have to be purposeful.
Yes.
You have to use technology. And like we use Microsoft Teams here. I have 2 employees that work remote part-time, and they're in the office part-time. Mm-hmm. And it's a really good mix so that we have that FaceTime with each other, but then we also have time where we can be heads down getting stuff done. And I purposely reach out consistently throughout the day, not just at scheduled times, at scheduled meetings, to check in with people. They reach out to me too. So we create that environment where even though they're not here, it's like they are, because it's instant communication.
And it brings to the point what you just talked about, resources, right? We have to ensure that our remote workforce has the resources, the technology, the platforms, whatever it is that you're going to utilize to create that sense of connection with your workforce. They need to be there.
Yeah, and it actually brings us to the next factor, which is clear expectations and accountability. And that's especially important in a virtual environment. Yeah. Because we have to be even more clear as to what the expectations are. Because we're not just going to walk over to someone's desk and check in and see how they're doing and help them get back on track if they're off track.
Yeah.
We need to be purposeful about setting expectations, sometimes on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
make sure that we're following an approach of positive accountability, which is where I follow up with you with the intent of supporting you, not catching you do something.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's where management, and leadership training plays a huge role, right? Because I think the old mindset for a long time is I'm holding you accountable. What are you working on, right? Let me see what you're working on, right? Rather than coming to that situation with how can I help you, right?
Right. Exactly.
Are there any roadblocks that you're facing, and what can I do in order to tackle that? What can I get off your plate, right? Sometimes we have to roll up our sleeves more than what we would like and say, hey, let me take some of that and help you, right? I mean, that's a different mentality, I think, for accountability than a lot of people have been,
Yeah, and that also speaks to the approach in using any of the factors, is that you first want to take a coaching approach.
Yeah.
And you first want to go in with the assumption that the person wants to do well, unless they prove otherwise.
Sure.
So if they retire but don't leave, like you had mentioned earlier, they're there, but they're only doing enough to get by so they don't get fired.
Yeah.
And they're not really helping you achieve ever greater standards of performance and goals, then it's time for a different type of conversation.
Yeah.
But with the intent of getting them back on track and getting them engaged.
Yeah. But
so clear expectations and accountability is another factor. And the best way to get people re-engaged is to speak to their intrinsic motivation, because motivation is another factor.
Yeah. And so how do you find that out? Because, I mean, again, that comes back to building of relationships, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you cannot find that out and just, in passing. You have to really care, really be empathetic, really, be of concern. And so what did you find in your studies?
What's really interesting, I mean, I love Herzberg's work on motivation, saying that there's two different types. There's intrinsic and extrinsic. There's other research that shows that there's motivators and satisfiers. So satisfiers are things that get you to a place where you're not disappointed, like your salary. If you're being paid fairly, then you're satisfied. If you get a raise, you get a little bit of a bump for temporary performance, but not for long-term performance.
Yeah.
And if you're being paid too much, it actually has a negative impact on individuals because they feel they have like imposter syndrome. They have a fear of this going away. They'll never find anything like this again.
Sure.
And it causes a lot of stress on individuals, which impacts performance.
Yeah.
But those are satisfiers. Motivators are really determined by the individual. And I found over time that they closely align with values. So some people might like to go to baseball games or basketball games or football games, and they value entertainment, whereas other people might value time with family.
Sure.
So time off for some people with baseball tickets to see, say, the Marlins or something, that might be very motivating. For others, time off would be great, but the Marlins tickets I could care less about.
Right.
What I really care about is just having the time to spend with my family.
Yeah.
So it's, like you said, relationships. It's knowing people, knowing what's driving them. And what's also really interesting about motivation is how you can use something that they really desperately want to get them to do things that they don't want to do. And I don't
say more about that
at all. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is having that career discussion with someone. And if I'm an entry-level trainer and I'm just learning training, and one day I want to be a training director, how can I get to a point where I'm performing so well in my job now that you want to help develop me for the next level up?
Yeah.
Which might be a leadership trainer. And then from leadership trainer to a training manager, and then from training manager to a training director. Chart that career path and say that you have to know all of this stuff in order to become a training director one day,
Yeah.
even though you don't have to do this as a training director. You have to be
Right.
really good at it.
Right.
Otherwise, how can you effectively work with people that do this?
And that's
Let's
a
start
good
there.
yeah, and that's a good point for people who are just starting out in the L&D
Yeah,
space. As with as you with your experience, I went from all the way from training coordinator to chief learning officer, right? And so
yeah,
uh, I didn't wait to get into the next position to learn about it. And I had to be
yeah,
inquisitive and research and learn and get my hands dirty. And even though I did that for years before moving
mhm,
to that next step, which is actually it's very beneficial, right? Because once you move into that position, you have sort of already
yeah,
the back experience to at least be able to navigate through that.
yes, exactly,
And that
exactly.
and
And
that
you have to start
applies.
doing the job
Yeah, that applies
before you
to
get the job.
and that applies to every position out there. And by the way, I mean it's nice. It's nice when organizations have L&D professionals. I mean, it keeps us employed. We love what we do. We love developing people. But I think that the first line of defense and maybe strategic growth happens with managers, right? Because they see us every so often, right? They come into our classroom
Yeah,
and take our classes every so often, and it's great. But they're having that daily interaction with their manager, and
yeah,
we tend to become who our leaders and managers are. And so
yeah,
you in our previous conversation, you mentioned that you had developed a leadership development program.
yeah.
What does that look like? Because do you agree with me that it's nice that they can come to our classes and we get to share with them, but that daily interaction with their manager and supervisor is probably where it's
Oh, yeah. They
where you
learn way
at.
more from the behavior modeling that they
Yeah,
see in their leaders, because it's not just about leadership behaviors that we teach in the classroom. It's about the informal behaviors that get rewarded in the workplace, the culture.
absolutely, absolutely.
So I could tell people they need to take a coaching approach in working with people all day long. But if they go back to work and their leaders command and control and rewarding them for yelling at people,
Yeah,
everything I said
yeah,
goes out the window,
yeah.
you know? So yeah, what what you're speaking of is from our previous conversation where I felt like we needed to have a model of what makes an effective leader
Hmm.
in order to have content valid training,
Sure.
meaning that the training is valid for our audience and driving the performance in the areas that matter to the organization. So I started creating a competency model, which most organizations have. And I've done that many times in my career for really large organizations like the Department of Commerce. I helped there with the architecture for all 11 bureaus
Oh, wow.
when I consulted with them, and down to small organizations with like 30 or 40 people. And I found that competency models, um, that they were missing something, direct tie to the business. So what I decided to do was go to the capability level and create a capability model. So what do our leaders need to be able to do for Broward Health to be successful in the
Mm-hmm.
future?
Mm-hmm.
So that's two things. One is it sets the standard of behavior. And number two, it's aspirational,
Sure.
which means it only focuses on development. It doesn't take more of a performance orientation, which is binary. Either I perform or I don't. It takes
Right.
a learning orientation, meaning that I either succeed or I learn, but there is no failure.
Yeah. 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 And so,
So
so is that what you're implementing right now at Broward Health?
yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
Huh.
And there's some differences based upon what I'm doing. Um, there's differences from other organizations and what they do.
And I'm assuming that affects the performance review process, correct?
It's going to inform the performance review process, but affect the performance development process more
Got it.
significantly.
Got it.
And the hiring process, because we'll have a model of what a good leader looks like.
Yeah.
So we can hire people with more capabilities coming in the door.
Yeah.
But the capability is the overarching, what do I need to be able to do Those are defined by competencies,
Yeah.
which really say these are the behaviors that define that capability. But the capability is what's more closely tied to the
That's
business.
that's interesting because good managers and leaders don't grow on trees.
They don't.
Right, and so
Yeah.
I mean, that's a challenge, I think, right? I mean, what are you looking for as an organization, um, to be able to find these people and plug them in, right?
Well, it's
Or
not just that, because performance is contextual.
mm-hmm.
So there's been organizations that I've been at where I've been loving life. I had a great boss. I've had um, really the reign to do my job, the ability to do my job, the empowerment to do my job at the highest levels possible.
Yeah.
And then I go to another organization with a command and control boss that yells at me,
Oof.
and I'm not performing as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not a different person. It's just a different context.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I mean, I don't know who would want to, subject themselves to a screaming boss all the time. But it really depends on how you're wired, right? I mean, some people don't care.
Yeah.
Right? I've had some of those in the past where you
Right.
sort of tune them out after a while.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
But again, it goes back to I mean, it seems like a fascinating project that you're working on, and I think it makes a lot of sense. My only again, my only question or concern is because there aren't, in my opinion, there aren't a lot of this type of training taking place in other organizations. We're sort of inheriting these people, right, and recruiting people from other
Yeah.
organizations. What is sort of the standards? What are we looking for? Are we looking for the potential that this individual, even though maybe they don't possess what we're looking for, but
Yeah.
they have the tendency to maybe grasp it.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think you're onto
There are
something.
some factors that determine potential
Mm-hmm.
that are innate that you can't change.
Yeah.
Um, but if you are on a team and you inherit people, I just assume they have the potential unless they prove otherwise.
Got it. Got it.
And
Okay.
I assume that because I want to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity to progress, to learn, to grow, and to do work that aligns with their strengths and that brings them joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that fascinating, Michael. Fascinating. I can't wait to. How far in the process are you right now? How far into this new?
So I'm just defining the competencies. Once I do that, then I'm going to do a pilot study with a group here at Broward Health. I'm also defining the levels of each competency different,
Okay.
because what happens usually is that there's like a 5-point rating scale or a 4-point rating scale, and you rate each behavior for each competency.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing is I'm creating 3 different buckets of proficiency relative to each competency. So the first bucket is low. I've never done this before, or I'm just not good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at the low level, and I'm behaviorally describing what that means.
Okay.
The next level is solid. I'm a solid performer. I can consistently perform at or above standards. And then the top level is I'm a high performer.
Yeah.
I consistently exceed standards across all of the behaviors in this competency. So when I go to rate a competency, I'm not rating 7 behaviors. I'm saying, am I low, solid, high?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that'll inform our curriculum. That's why we need this infrastructure, is because it's an evidence-based approach to what works here and marrying that to the research, which there's not a lot of.
Mm.
But then it informs our curriculum, because the question is, how do I get someone from a low performer to a solid performer? And the answer is that they have to develop the foundation of that competency.
Yeah.
So if the competency is communicating effectively with others, it's basic 101 communication skills.
And so are other people sort of giving you input into that, into your own
Yeah.
performance? Is it
Yeah, that's
almost like a
gonna be part of the
360
pilot
approach?
study, is really validating this with leaders
Mm-hmm.
and getting their feedback as well.
Okay. Do you
and then
give
I can make tweaks to the model.
do you also give the individual the opportunity to rate themselves? So I think I'm performing at the top, right? So I'm gonna rate
Yeah,
myself
I
that.
think it works best as a conversation
Okay.
as opposed to me going in a room and rating myself, or a leader going into a room and rating everyone else on their team.
Yeah.
So it's a
Eh,
better as a conversation between the two
yeah. No,
because it's about development.
yeah, no,
Where
absolutely.
am I now, which will inform where I develop.
The concern there, and this is what I've seen in the past, is that managers don't want to take that time to have those to have those conversations. They rather check the boxes, right? And then they end
Well,
up paying the price for it, right? Because you have a
yeah, you're
sub-performing.
going to take the time either way.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
going to take the time with the person that you have or with the new person that they replace.
yeah. But we're I don't know. I mean, that's always been my struggle
Yeah,
in helping managers see through. And maybe it's because I like to think again myself a natural sort of servant leader, and so I love developing people. I love
yeah,
growing people. I love coaching. I love so it's really innate for me to do that. Not everybody's wired the same way, and so I've come across managers like, what do you mean I have to have these
well,
conversations? What do you mean you're not having those conversations? How can you manage and lead and not want to have those conversations, right?
if you have time to do it twice, you have time to do it right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely
So why
right.
not just do it right the first time?
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, brother.
And there's so many other benefits to just having that conversation with people.
Yeah,
It really changes the relationship
absolutely. It,
from
it should. Yeah,
I'm a manager managing you to I'm leading you. I'm
yeah,
providing the vision and helping guide you down the path, but you're deciding what's important on that path. What stops do
yeah.
you want to take
Yes,
so that you
yes.
can grow your skills?
Yeah,
What's important and impactful in terms of your current performance to get you to a level where you're part of the succession plan and we're
yeah,
developing you for a future role that aligns with your career interest and the needs of the organization.
yeah, yeah. And I
That happens.
no, right. And I think that it'll taking that approach. I mean, I don't think it eliminates the politics. You know how a lot of people say, well, it doesn't matter what I do. Susan
Yeah,
already is looking at John to be the next in line, and so it doesn't matter what I do, and so it becomes this cynical
right.
approach to so people and again I tell people, look, you can't control those things. The only thing you can control is your own career and what you do and what you learn, right? Nobody can take that away from you. And whether it's in this organization or you need to move on to the other organization, it's to your benefit to really, learn these
Yeah,
skills. And but you know how that goes, right? I mean, a lot of people say, it doesn't matter what classes I take and what I do because maybe somebody who doesn't put as much effort into these processes is going to end up getting the promotion anyway. So, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
If I could circle back to the factors,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
covered
absolutely.
six of the seven,
Okay, go ahead.
and the seventh one is
But
probably the
by the way, this
easiest
is
for
so
us.
good. I apologize that I took you,
No, no, that's
but
okay. I love a dynamic conversation.
yeah, go ahead.
So the seventh factor is knowledge and skill, and that's when training is the solution
Yeah,
because either they've never done it before and don't know how to do it, or they've done it before but they haven't done it in a while and they forgot.
that he practiced. Yeah,
And so you really got to figure out what's going on, and do they need to be reminded because that's a really short learning path, or do
yeah,
they need to be developed, which is a little bit longer,
sure.
both of which are worthwhile.
I love it. I love the so name them again because we maybe
So
some
we
people
started with process,
process.
and then talent and fit,
Okay.
then tools and resources, and then the environment, and then clear expectations and accountability, and then we covered motivation, and then knowledge and skill.
Love it.
And once you isolate the area of performance, the strength that you want to expand, not the weakness that they have to fix, otherwise you're going to fire them.
Yeah.
That's a whole different approach. That's what we used to do, was that gap-based approach.
Right.
Here's where you stink, Michael. So you got to fix this. Figure out what's going on and fix it. Actually, we wouldn't even say figure out what's going on. We'd say, here's where you stink. Here's a class.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's again, I think that hopefully organizations are evolving into
Yeah,
your
I see.
approach, Michael. It's also my philosophy, right? I mean, I'm a learning and development guy. I love designing curriculums and classes. I love conducting classes. I love doing online training. I mean, I love all that stuff. But it's not the whole, it's not
Yeah,
the whole answer, right? It's not
right.
the final answer. And I think that your approach holistically looks at both the organization and the individuals. Hey,
Yeah,
how do we make
yeah.
this thing work even better, right? And so I think that listen, you're right on onto something that I can't wait to see what happens at Broward Health.
Yeah, I'll
You
definitely keep you
you'll,
informed.
you'll probably and we'll see it, right? I mean, this is what when I
Yeah,
used to work at a retailer, and I used to say, look, if you go to a store and you get great customer experience, great customer service, I had something to do with that. If you don't, that means they never attended my classes. They never took my training. So, but I can't wait to see what happens there. We'll put the link to your. Is it available on Kindle? Is your
it is.
okay?
Yeah,
So
through Amazon.
we'll put a link there and go ahead and buy that book. I want to buy it, and
Cool.
so definitely, Michael. I cannot wait to see what happens. Thank you so much for taking. I mean, I know you're a busy guy. For
No
those of you
problem.
who don't know, I mean, Broward Health is a big, organization down here in Florida. So I'm very grateful that you took the time to be with us
My
today, and we'll
pleasure.
we'll definitely come back anytime. We'll love to have you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Reggie.
Any last words of advice that you can give L&D professionals that maybe a nice little nugget there that you can leave them with?
Yeah, figure out what you want, where you want to go, what you want to do. There's a lot of resources these days that we didn't
Yeah.
have when I was growing up in training. ATD is an awesome organization. They've
Yeah.
got a capability model, but their capability are buckets for competencies. They're not tied to a business because they're an association.
Right.
Um, but go there. You can see all the different areas, the practice areas, 9 different practice areas or capabilities in learning and performance. And just keep at it.
Yeah.
Always be learning, always grow. Um,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
probably
I,
the best advice I could
I
give.
yeah, no, that's again coming from somebody with your experience, it means a lot, Michael. So thank you so much for spending the time with us. And to those of you who tuned in, I listen. We could do this. We could do this podcast into a 3 hour seminar and probably not even scratch the surface. I promise I'm going to bring Michael again so we can continue the conversation. Hopefully you gained a lot from it. And by the way, get his book. Stay connected, and all the best for those of us who are in L&D. We make a difference every single day, and as we go and our managers and leaders go, so will the organization. So keep that in mind. Till next time, take care. Bye bye.